Coachella, Lollapalooza, Bonnaroo, they're events. They're rites of passage. People come from all over the world to go to these big festivals. These festivals, however, aren't selling quite as well as they used to because the lineups just aren't appealing to the people who are willing to go to these shows. What we're seeing is a buffet approach, something for everybody, but not something for one particular fan of a genre. You know, Coachella back in the day was very much a rock festival. Now it's a hip-hop festival, it's a rock festival, it's a EDM festival, it's a pop festival, it's a hip-hop festival. You know, it's a mishmash of things. And some of the bigger festivals are having to rethink what they're going to be doing when it comes to booking bands forward. The festivals that are doing well in the United States are the ones that are targeted. You know, the metal festivals, the emo festivals, the retro festivals. People seem to they seem to be showing a preference for going to festivals that are targeted to their specific tastes. We're going to see how this plays out over the last little while. The big thing that people were watching was Coachella this year because it did not sell out in advance like it did in the past, and this is the second year in a row.
Interesting. Okay, what about the cancellation of Bonnaroo this year? You were talking about it.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of concern and a lot of practical issues involving climate change or extreme weather. The first time I really started paying attention to this was back in 2011 in Indiana. The Indiana State Fair, a country band called Sugarland was playing, and there was a huge windstorm that brought down a stage and injured and killed some people.
Wow.
If we go a little further, we see that wildfires have impacted shows in all parts of the world. In 2022, there was a series of fires in France. Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam blew out his voice. He couldn't sing in that environment. Another festival was canceled because it was just too smoky. Earlier this year, here in Western Canada, we had the Birds Hill Folk Festival, and it was under pressure because of wildfires coming from Western Canada. So smoke is a problem. Heat is a problem. If we go to Australia, heat, of course, is a really big problem, and they actually commissioned a report saying that, listen, if the temperature approaches 40 degrees, we're not going to go. 85% of people say they weren't going to go. And 13% of people in this particular survey said that they are buying fewer festival tickets as a result of their fear of extreme weather.
Okay, that's in Australia. What about North America, Europe? Have we seen that kind of report come out in these areas? Because they're facing the same problems.
I haven't seen a report, but we do have anecdotal evidence. The Steve Miller Band, for example, was supposed to go on tour this summer, and they canceled everything due to natural causes. They said that they were too worried about playing outdoors this summer because of things like wildfire smoke, like rain, like lightning, like, you know, wind, all those things. So that was rather interesting.
So are other big festivals taking this into consideration? I lived in New Orleans for 6 years, and everybody lived for the last week in March, first week in April, Jazz Fest down in that area. But man, even then, it still gets, what, like 35 degrees Celsius at times. It gets very hot, and they have to stop playing before it gets dark, so it has to be right in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Heat is going to be a real problem for the summer music festivals. Again, we can go back into the past. 1999, the Woodstock 99 festival in New York, where it was at an old Air Force base where, you know, we had several 100,000 people basically spending an entire weekend baking on the concrete of some runways. So
yeah, that was a fiasco.
It was a terrible fiasco. And now we're going to have to be really careful as music fans and music consumers about whether or not we want to go. I mean, you were talking just a little while ago about what happened at Burning Man, where, you know, Burning Man is this huge thing in the desert, in the Nevada desert, and it was decimated by this huge dust storm, which also closed down the airport in Phoenix. Then their famous Orgy Dome somehow went up in flames. I don't know why, but maybe it had something to do with the weather. I don't know.
That seems to happen more and more out there. Okay, moving on. The All-American Rejects are creating a storm that means less money for these big festivals, but more fun, if you will, for fans. They've been doing pop-up house parties at random homes to protest what they're calling the inaccessibility and high cost of live music. Do you see this kind of changing the landscape as well? Well,
the concert industry is under a lot of pricing pressure. nobody's making any money selling records anymore, so you have to be very creative when it comes to playing live, because that will be your major source of revenue. And there are some bands like All American Rejects who are doing it old school. They're taking it back to the streets and playing these pop-up shows. We have a service here in Canada called Side Door Access, and they do the same sort of thing for acts that would like to play smaller shows and offer a reasonable ticket price. It is a good way for lower to middle class bands to find new audiences, or at least have some fan engagement that they can offer at a reasonable price. If you're Beyonce or Coldplay or Oasis or any of those others, that's not a problem. But the middle class and the lower class of the music industry is being hollowed out because you just can't make any money. So some bands, like All American Rejects, are getting very creative. And they're not the only one. I've seen plenty of other bands that are doing living room shows, or they're doing a show at a brewery or a juice factory or something like that.
Yeah, to pick up on that, the Warped Tour finally came back this year after basically seemingly calling it quits back in 2019, but it caters to a different genre of fans rather than the big names. And it was largely successful at smaller type venues. In DC, we have the 930 Club. It capitalized on that by hosting its own party at the same time for fans who couldn't make it out to that sold out event. Is that a good way to go? Do you think that that is going to help that genre grow, if you will, for lack of a better term?
Listen, the organizer of the Warped Tour is Kevin Lyman. He's a really smart guy. He was able to take that festival for like a quarter of a century, have, literally dozens and dozens of bands on every stop on the tour. And they used to play, 19, 20, 25 shows over a course of the summer. And he kept the ticket prices reasonable. Yeah. Because, he would have a couple of big names on the festival that would, take, a bigger share. But, some bands would be paying, $250, $300 a night, and then they would have to work the barbecue for all the other bands at the end. It was a different thing. It was a community thing. It was getting back to the fans thing. It was an anti-establishment thing, and it worked very well for a very long time. Now, it has been scaled down. I think there were only 3 Warped Tour shows this year, and they all were all in the United States. But maybe this is a trial balloon to see if that kind of touring festival, that carnival that Warped Tour is being known for, could help. Again, this is the punk music ethic, right? You are of the people for the people. So nobody's there to make a lot of money. They're there just to play music. So it works in that environment. I don't know if it works too well in others.